So can we have a huge round of applause, please, for Mr. P.K. Das? Ladies and gentlemen, his take on building for the bottom billion. Thank you.
Well, when some of us speakers walked in this morning, or rather drove into this venue this morning, and we were dropped at the gate, we then walked into this place, and we naturally walked to the main auditorium where we are sitting here. But we were quickly turned away. We were turned out, and we were asked to go to the backyard. And in that backyard, we were quickly huddled into a small, exclusive room. And after a minute or two, some of us tried to break away from there. So my topic for today's presentation is turning the backyards into proud forecourts. How we can do away with these backyards of neglect, of decadence, of rejection, of intolerance, and of decay. I would like to start with a point which is really the context of my talk, and that is about how cities are being increasingly divided. Increased social discrimination and exclusion has led to deepening social fissures across city landscapes. Intolerance is today the hallmark of social and political condition in the country. Rather, it's the increasing levels of tolerance, as I may put it, and apathy to constant abuse and the rapidly growing urban chaos that is fast eroding or dismantling the idea of cities is really of concern to us. Such discord and disharmony is also evident in the land use and planning of cities. Spaces are increasingly divided, colonized, and barricaded in order to achieve exclusivity. Cities are being constantly fragmented into disparate and often conflicting paths. And what this is resulting in is the anarchy of development, which we often see through cities and cities over in India under the guise of development, in which merely construction turnover, sadly, is the sole basis of judging growth and progress. Some of these slides very quickly show what I'm talking about. The merely construction turnover as being really considered as the sole basis of judging development, progress, and growth. The slide here is particularly interesting. How buildings are competing with each other without a comprehensive land use plan for the city, and how one high-rise that promises a clear view, an endless view to the sea, is then covered by another one in front of it, and yet another one in front of that, and how these clusters of buildings begin to define our urban landscapes that we are deeply concerned about, or rather the fall of the cities and the whole essence and the idea of cities. So my next point that I'm making, this is the second point. I've just got 6 points to make, which is what is undermining. So from there I go to another phenomena which deeply concerns many of us as architects and planners, or as planners and architects across the country. And that I put it as the trend towards undermining design, and in a challenge to that, the claiming of design rights, as any other fundamental rights in the country be. I'm foxed, if not surprised, as much as many of you here would be, as to why design is not considered important in the development of our cities in India. Mr. Jha talked about that being the foundation of the gift city in Gujarat, but certainly that's not the experience anywhere else. Instead, development works are being continuously driven by our policies. Our political leaders and bureaucrats play a dominant role in the formulation of policies without any understanding or assessment of the impact these policies would have on urban form or built environment. And this is precisely the focus of our attention today in my talk. Impact of urban spaces on our lives is so enormous that it becomes necessary to focus on design that shape and reshape space continuously. As a matter of fact, design is an effective democratic tool of social change, and therefore must be put to public domain, popularized, in order to free it from the shackles of manifold control and exclusivity. The multiple barriers between people and development decisions that are being continuously reinforced by sophisticated policies and programs are often leading to unacceptable and unsustainable growth with alarming social and environmental consequences. So that's very broadly these 2 points in a way sets out the context in which I will move forward and talk about talk about a way forward from here. But before that, the issue of planning as a design right, which is a demand that I put forward as an essential need for development of cities. I would like to pursue this idea and put forward that a demand for urban planning and design to be considered as a right and brought to public dialogue be considered. The democratization of urban planning and design would be a significant step towards the achievement of just and equal cities. So it's not just about planning and design rights, but the popularization and democratization of planning and design rights, which would really lead to the establishment or achievement of just and equal cities. Exercising this right would be an effective means for intervention to bring about the much needed socio-environmental change and then reflected in the design of cities. In the context of rapid urbanization and city building effort, people's movements in and across cities for claiming urban planning and design rights has therefore come to be an essential demand as much as other civic rights. There are now many citizens' movements across the country in many cities which are beginning to demand their participation and their right to participate in planning and design decisions. And they are intervening to, through collective endeavors, bring up solutions and alternatives, and which are particularly very interesting. So the way forward from here, these were some quick examples of some of these movements in Mumbai from where I belong and I work. There have been significant works and movements which I will maybe detail out a bit later. But the next point is the way forward. And the first point in way forward would be the mapping of our cities in that whole process of planning and design and the democratization of planning and design. I would put mapping of the cities as the first point. That is starting from the margins or starting from the bottom or starting from those exclusions and backyards of cities. All you need is a plan, the roadmap, and the courage to press on to your destination. Maps are an insight into a nation's progress. Not maps that define national boundaries or city boundaries, but maps that define cities and their neighborhoods. Maps that reveal the resources we have and how we share them, and the resources that we may have lost. Mapping is an intense socio-political act. It enables active public participation and the public dialogue. Mumbai's new 2034 development plan, as an example, which is under preparation, is probably a case in this direction to illustrate how active people's interventions forced the government to withdraw the development plan and re-prepare and reconstitute the plan through a participatory mechanism. So plans are a very interesting beginning of participatory process in the building up of planning and design decisions. And in this endeavor, we've done many mappings in Mumbai. We did for the first time an integrated open spaces mapping for the city with startling revelations that led to public arguments and discussions. We also did for the first time the slum mapping for the city of Mumbai, which also revealed very interesting facts. For example, challenging the mainstream middle class and upper class arguments, the slums are eating away the open spaces of the city, where we found the slums had only occupied 5% of the open spaces of the city, where the rest of the encroached open spaces were actually colonized by real estate agencies and developers. So such are the interesting democratic processes that come out of mapping. My next point is the re-envisioning of cities and changing the context. So we need to change the context in which we work, and we need to re-envision our cities. So one of the ways to do that I may suggest, is by focusing on the public spaces. And we experience through cities in India that as cities expand, public spaces are rapidly shrinking. And when I say public spaces are rapidly shrinking, I don't mean just the physical open spaces, but I also mean the democratic space, which is rapidly shrinking. That means space for public dialogue, interaction, exchange, and what we cherish to keep calling ourselves as a democratic state is beginning to threaten and diminish. And in that endeavor, we probably could think about then a movement for establishing open cities. Cities that are open for dialogue, for interaction, for community engagement, and a participatory process. And in that endeavor, of course, we've done many exercises in Mumbai, including a big exhibition that we put up called the Open Mumbai Exhibition, which was on for 2 months, but then with popular demand went on for almost about 1 year in the city, that engaged all political representatives, including the government, and which has substantially then led to a public dialogue and has, I would say, in many different ways, which I will not elaborate now, influenced the preparation of the new development plan of the city. And here are 2 examples of how the entire city of Mumbai was re-envisioned through this one aspect of the expansion of public spaces as a political and social demand. And on the slide on the right is a town of Pimpri-Chinchwad, which is close to Mumbai and Pune, whose master plan was drawn by us, re-envisioning the city on the basis of its public spaces network. The whole argument being that public spaces ought to form the basis of city planning. From there, we move on to the 5th point. I have about 6 points in all, but the 6th is the 5th is an elaborate explanation. And that is about the point about turning backyards into proud forecourts. And that's the subject of my talk today. And this is an idea that I've been talking about for a long time. In the year 2012, the citizens of Juhu, along with myself and very many other individuals, launched a significant movement for the conservation and integration of over 4 kilometers of a nala, called the Irla Nala, in their neighborhood of Juhu. Municipal authorities wondered why this was of any importance, but the movement continued with determination, backed by substantive survey data and design details. Comprehensive plans and implementation programs were drawn up too by citizens. Public meetings were held in several public places. Posters and books were published. Vision Juhu as an example of a book that came out. Posters were put up in public areas explaining the movement and the projects as were published. Nallas, as all of you know in India, for those who are from outside the country, would know Nallas as popularly known in India, are one example of such spaces of discontent. Nallas connote filth, stink, and place for disposal of wastes. In city planning too, they're treated as being the backyards of the city, sites to be away from. Similarly, many other areas like the natural areas of the cities or the places where working class people, for example, live and reside are neglected and treated also as the backyards of the city, the slums, for example, as being one of them. Or we may say that there are very few select areas. Alternately, we may say that there are very few select areas that are accorded greater significance and given priority in the development programs of cities. As a result, vast stretches of land and surrounding environment and resources are ignored and left out to deteriorate further. Moreover, as these spaces do not attract the attention of realty developers in many instances, the poor in search of roof over their heads occupy them to build their makeshift homes. The phenomena is most evident in Mumbai, Calcutta, Delhi, and many other cities in India. Our central objective by this movement is to bring Juhu together, a neighborhood in Mumbai, and the people of Juhu together, connecting and networking the various isolated, disparate, and fragment spaces and activities is a means to achieving this objective of integration of cities. These include the various open spaces, the Nala itself, the gardens, parks, playgrounds, public institutions like colleges, schools, training centers, transportation hubs, etc., into a public realm vision. A vision that's built around these public spaces. These connected spaces would then be networked. We talked about network as an important aspect presented by one of speakers before me. And these connected spaces would then be networked with neighborhood streets for further integration and accessibility. So there is no single space which is isolated. There's no single space which is alone or left out, but they're a part of a larger network and system of social and physical environment that we are struggling to establish that would be hopefully equal and accessible. This effort would nourish community life, neighborhood engagements and participation, thus truly symbolizing our democratic aspirations. Through this plan, we will generate, sorry, that's the Nala picture. And this is some of the images of the project which is fast under implementation today. Through this plan, we will generate an active and pulsating system of public spaces that would form the heart of Juhu, the neighborhood of Juhu. This will also provide a distinct identity to our neighborhood and all our people. Women, children, the old, the young will all find an opportunity to walk, to cycle, play, interact, intermingle in these network spaces. Groups will have opportunity to organize spontaneous and planned activities like meetings, music programs, dance programs, art festivals, get-togethers, games, etc. I must tell you here that through some of our earlier experiences in Mumbai, the reclaiming of Mumbai's waterfronts, for example, where we have already converted about 8 kilometers of Mumbai's western seafronts into significant popular public promenades and public spaces, have led to two very important festivals that have come into being in the last several years, born out of these projects. The people of Bandra have a month-long festival every year called Celebrate Bandra. So they're beginning to now celebrate their neighborhoods. And so in Juhu, we have Juhu Meri Jaan as the festival. And such interesting social movements have begun to now come about through these physical transformations. But one of the significant things that is also coming about from here is walking and cycling, which we are strongly proposing as an alternative means of mobility to our increased dependency on motorized transportation, which is getting into the knots of constant congestion, pollution, and there is no end to resolving them by just building more flyovers and more roads, as we've learned through the world examples, that more roads just bring in more cars. So can we therefore envision our cities with a stream of linear open spaces defining a new geography of cities? Can we break away from the large monolithic spaces and geometric structures into fluid streams of linear open spaces, meandering, modulating, and negotiating varying city terrains akin to rivers and watercourses? This way, the new structure of open spaces would relate and intermingle with many more areas and people, as the Nala would do, or the promenades of Bandra do, because they're long, they're linear strips, that many more people, many more buildings, many more areas then begin to sort of closely relate to some of these areas. This way, a new structure of open space would relate to and integrate with many more areas and people across neighborhoods in the city. Through such an endeavor, it would be possible to not only recognize the backyards, but the integration of them with the city and turn them into important social and environmental forecourts. I'm using this as a metaphor, in a sense, of developing and re-envisioning our cities. The whole aspect of the backyards or the stream of open spaces that could flow across city landscape as a metaphor. In terms of physical planning, our aim is to develop a contiguous open spaces by interconnecting various facets and areas open to the public. This would produce a network of green and blue corridors throughout the city and its various localities, nourishing community life, neighborhood engagements, and participation. In the particular case of Irla Nala integration, the project includes the cleaning and treatment of the waters also, which is obviously a very important aspect of the project. But this then takes me to the next point, which is extremely important. These were some of the posters that were put up in multiple languages when we were holding many public meetings to bring about, to popularize this movement and stakeholders, which talked about the coercive force of the residents of Juhu with a bit of love, as it's called in Hindi, Juhugiri, pyar se. The next point is the equal streets. I'm thankful to Sen Kapadia, who gave compliments to some of our activities in Mumbai, and the Equal Streets movement, where we've started in Mumbai, in Bandra area, where over 50,000 people turn up every Sunday morning. And we're saying we need to structurally change the plans and designs of our streets to make them friendly to walking and cycling, and seeing and cutting down and expanding on public transport, and cutting down on our increased dependency on private transportation and motorized transportation. I will skip this particular point in that same endeavor, which is, of course, one of the most important points in this debate of the turning of the backyards into proud forecourts, and how the integration of slums and affordable housing could become a way of looking at addressing the issues of affordable housing, where we've put up many interesting options before the government. And through the slum mapping, we also done a master planning of slums redevelopment. And we are arguing that slum-occupied lands be reserved in the development plan of cities as land for affordable housing. And so I will not get into that issue, but just to mention how important this is. And we've led some of the most significant slum rehabilitation projects, by now probably having rehoused and rehabilitated over 100,000 families, much, much bigger than all combined effort of the private industry and the governments put together in that city. Just in about 3 or 4 different projects that have been executed to a large extent. More than 50,000 families have already moved into their new homes in some of these projects. So these were some of the posters, again, campaigning, popularizing designs, preparing designs through collective effort. We called it Hamara Naya Sheher, the new aspirations of the people when they moved from the demolished slums to their rehabilitation areas, etc. So I'll just skip them very quickly. And it was incredible when these people moved. More than 4 consecutive chief ministers and governments have visited these areas. And we have very interesting cases come out of there, talking about how cities must integrate these backyards if they have to live, survive, be equal and just.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah,
You have another 5.
yeah, sure. Thank you. I will not again dwell upon this at length, but just to make an important point, how our natural areas have always been considered in master planning of cities or planning and design of cities as being the backyards. And in case of Mumbai in particular, they have been literally and metaphorically been used as the dumping grounds of the city. We've turned our backs to them, and we, just use them as a dumping ground, and we keep encroaching and destroying them. And there has been significant attempts now throughout Mumbai, through various citizens' movements, to stop that, to integrate the areas. And I must say that the new draft development plan of the city, for the first time, and let me repeat, this is for the first time that the formal development plan of the city has begun to map and recognize the natural areas of the city as being a part of the master plan. And that's an incredible achievement which kicked off from many such movements of wetlands, of mangroves, of creeks, of seafronts, of rivers, of nallas, and so on and so forth. I go now to my last maybe the last point, in fact, which is neighborhood-based city planning as a means to democratizing city development. Considering neighborhoods as the basis as a means for organizing movements for effective democratization of urban planning and design is important. Such an approach facilitates local people's active participation in matters concerning their areas, which they know best, while influencing the city planning and development decisions. Through a neighborhood-based development approach, it would be possible to decentralize. And localize projects and their designs, breaking away from the mega monolithic planning and design ideas, with enormous investments that impose unbearable burdens on the lives of most people. Neighborhood-based urban planning, which has been talked about at length and written and championed by somebody like Jane Jacobs in New York, Neighborhood-based urban planning and design approaches would also facilitate closer interaction between people and their elected representatives. Importantly, neighborhood work creates a more collaborative approach to city and place making. The various reclaiming public spaces movements in Mumbai is an example towards that which I talked about. With public space being the main planning criteria, we hope to bring about a social change, promote collective culture, and root out alienation and false sense of individual gratification that is being promoted by the markets. Our experience of cities development is interventions by citizens, as in Bandra Jew and other areas of Mumbai, would have never been anticipated, and this is important, by a master plan of the city. By achieving intense levels of citizen participation, we wish to forever public spaces, we wish to influence governments to devise comprehensive plans and integrate disparate developments. The open and clear forever public space policy would truly symbolize our democratic aspirations. This is a significant way to rebuild humane and environmentally sustainable cities. There are many projects in Mumbai that we are doing collectively. And when I'm speaking here, I'm speaking on behalf of many, many movements that I work with and associate with. And these have begun to, like, for example, the railway stations and creating public spaces over railway stations as an example, etc. Now, I would like to just conclude by saying that cities are a rich depository of multiple and pluralistic ideas. Reducing them to a single or exclusive vision, and this is very important, that we're constantly being pushed to by various brands and various packagings, would break cities down to oppressive and discriminatory order. The unification of the fragmented and disparate parts should not mean simplifying city building to monotonous, repetitive blocks of buildings. That networking and unification of cities as a tenet of democracy can provide community opportunity for varied community expressions in all its richness, bringing about much needed transformations through design, thus leading to a new architecture of cities and new identities. Thank you very much.